Hi, my name is Ritzy Widjaja, and my topic of inquiry is on the Jakarta Intercultural School lawsuit case, which occurred in April 2014. Inspiration to investigate this case first sparked when I visited the school last year. I saw posters plastered everywhere, and people, students specifically, held shrines honoring these two men. Now, I was hearing rumors going around about how these two innocent men were tried for sexually abusing children on the basis of no evidence but the testimonies of the child victims. I wanted to understand what was going on with this case because this problem hits home with me, and I realized that this case is fraught with irregularities. Now, I define irregularities as a defect or mistake in a legal proceeding or lawsuit. So it isn't necessarily an unlawful act. However, in certain instances, it is serious enough to render a lawsuit invalid. Now, if you take a look at this image, it is of the Corruption Perception Index 2015. And given this, Indonesia is actually a corrupt country. It received a score of 36 on a scale of 0 to 100, 0 being considered a highly corrupt country. Now, why does this matter? It begs the question, did corruption play a role in this case? Now, this case has already attracted attention from a lot of international communities, and it has tarnished the reputation of Indonesia as a whole. And I hope that by investigating this case, I will be able to exploit a weakness or weaknesses in the Indonesian legal process and highlight the problems that the Indonesian government should deal with. And with what I'm thinking, ultimately, corruption could be the problem in this case. Now, this ties along with my research question. Now, a lot of scholarly articles discuss corruption in Indonesia, specifically examining Suharto and his time as president in Indonesia from 1967 to 1998. But not many today have researched corruption in the GIST lawsuit case. And this is probably because it's such a recent case, so no one has actually spent the time to research corruption in this case. And this ties along with my working thesis. The controversial decision in the Jakarta Intercultural School lawsuit case signified the lack of transparency and the inconsistencies on the rule of law in Indonesia. Now, to add some context to this, originally these two teachers were tried and they were sentenced to jail for 10 years. However, the Supreme Court soon acquitted the two men under the basis that there was no evidence in the first place, so they were free to go. But recently, as in a few days ago, the Supreme Court had overturned the acquittal, and this time around, the teachers are sentenced for 11 years. However, due to a lack of transparency, they did not actually give a reason as to why they overturned the acquittal. So there's no information on as to why they were even sentenced again. And now this thesis addresses the problem of the judicial system and how it is susceptible to corruption. In fact, in 2013, the Chief Justice of Indonesia's Constitutional Court, which is on the same level as the Supreme Court, was allegedly charged for bribery. And so that kind of demonstrates how even corruption can occur at the highest levels of the judicial system. And this aligns very well with my process of inquiry because I'm focusing on corruption in a court case, which is a judicial system. Now, method. I'm conducting a qualitative case study on the GIST lawsuit case itself. Now, given that I'm focusing on how the court case came to be and if corruption played a role, this method aligns very well with my process of inquiry. Now, what I'm doing is collecting as many articles as possible. And of course, I will not be able to collect every article possible. But in order to avoid any confirmation bias, I have to collect articles that go against my thesis as well. So if it says anything that goes against my hypothesis, I will have to take note of it in order to have an objective way of retrieving my data. Now, given that the trial is actually closed to the public, so bailmen and the teachers and the lawyers, they actually aren't allowed to talk to the public. This is because the case is involving minors, so I don't have any access to any primary sources, and this kind of shows how there's a lack of transparency, and this is part of my limitations for my method, which I'll discuss in my findings. Now, findings. What I'm doing is collecting all the news articles possible, pinpointing all the irregularities like I defined earlier, and organizing them into categories. As you can see, I sorted them into legal-related evidence, police-related evidence, and general evidence itself. Now, considering that all this evidence is found from these news articles, in order to make it more credible, I have to triangulate all the evidence. Unfortunately enough, all the evidence I collected, I was able to triangulate because all the sources I found, they all had the same information on the evidence, so there's not differing information on it. Now, I'm going to provide you guys with one of the irregularities I found just to show as an example. So Neil Bateman, he was actually accused of conjuring a magic stone, literally a magic stone, that's what they defined it as, a magic stone, and inserting it into the anuses of one of the children as a form of anesthesia. The magic stone, however, it was not shown to Bateman, nor the children, nor to any of the judges, so no one knows what the stone looked like, no one knows where it came from, no one even knows like what it even looks like, or no one has ever seen it. So that kind of brings up a question like, how is this possible? How is it that the judges actually accepted this testimony from one of the children? A magic stone suddenly appeared. So this is kind of where I have to avoid any biases and not try to analyze it for what it is. Just leave it and let the readers decide like what to do with this piece of evidence. And this kind of brings up my significance of the conclusion. So, like I stated before, this case has attracted attention from a lot of international communities, and the outcome of this case could, in fact, scare away potential foreign investors. In fact, according to Robert O. Blake, the U.S. ambassador to Indonesia, the international community here, foreign investors, and foreign governments are all following the case involving the JIS teachers very closely. Now, the outcome of this case and what it reveals about the rule of law in Indonesia will have a significant impact on Indonesia's reputation abroad. So considering all this and all the amount of pressure, the government of Indonesia should feel pressure to act and do something about this. They should fix the judicial system and see what's going on with the police force and see if corruption has a role. Now, if the government doesn't act, well, then the judicial system will continue to have inconsistencies on the rule of law, and cases such as the JIS case could occur again in the future. So that's why it's important that the JIS government should act now. And that's where my paper comes in. It's highlighting all the problems. I'm not necessarily making an argument, but I'm highlighting all the problems that the government should deal with, for example, the police force and judicial system. And as this picture shows, it kind of shows like several figures, several aspects of Indonesia pointing fingers. And this kind of demonstrates how Indonesia is a mess because there are so many problems in many different aspects of it. Now, I'm not going to give a reason as to, I'm not going to show how we can fix these problems, but I'm just identifying these problems. So in terms of future direction, other researchers could further research these problems and elaborate more on them and find solutions for these problems. So that's pretty much my significance of my inquiry. Thank you.